Okay. Charter schools and district-run schools, obviously, a lot of our discussions in the education community. So of course, we had to ask, do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of charter schools? 52%, a majority, no surprise there. That's very consistent. We usually see them in the mid-50s range, 30% unfavorable. Party affiliation, obviously, I think most people know Republicans are big supporters of charter schools. Democrats, not as much, but a plurality of unaffiliated voters do. But also, I'd point out, look at the parent versus non-parent breakout there. Parents absolutely support them, 2/3, 65%, where non-parent support is not as strong. Plurality do have a favorable opinion of them, but nowhere near as high as the parents. So clearly, I feel that this wasn't as much of a surprise, and it was relatively in line, I think, with other public education surveys. Erica?
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly seen questions around charter school policy be dominant issues in local school board elections. Particularly, I'm in Denver, so it's certainly been an issue in Denver school board elections, and we're starting to see more divide among Democrats at. I would say at the legislature, we still see very strong support for charter schools among most Democrats, but it is an issue that divides Democrats, and it's an issue that we see in national polling also divides Democrats. And there is a racial divide in that white Democrats tend to be more opposed to charter schools, and Black and Latino Democrats tend to have more favorable views. As a parent myself, one of my gut here is I think a lot of parents just feel like they like having choices for their kids, as opposed to approaching it from a really ideological perspective.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we had an open-ended here. Please explain the differences between a charter schools and district-run schools. I really encourage everybody to look at this. I found these responses absolutely fascinating. Do you understand the difference? And I felt that a lot of the themes that evolve, like if you have a favorable opinion of charter schools, you're going to tout the positives, freedom of curriculum, higher student achievement. It's better managed than district-run schools, teaching to the student. Like they just felt it was great. If you have an unfavorable opinion of charters, though, they're not inclusive. They can turn away students. There's no diversity, and it's a biased curriculum. It's either very narrow, teaching, something. And some of those comments got pretty harsh in there, and be very honest. People really do feel strongly about it one way or the other. But I was also pleasantly surprised. Many of the responses, people were on the mark of explaining what a charter school is and how it is run differently than a district-run school. So people were pretty knowledgeable about it, even among those non-parents. Erica?
Yeah, I felt like a majority of these responses were basically accurate, that people had an understanding of sort of where they fit in terms of regulatory environment, flexibility. There were still, interestingly, even some people who had favorable opinions of charter schools described them as private or semi-private. So for people who would like charter schools to be viewed as part of the public school family, probably still some work to do on that messaging. Yeah. But I think the other thing that's reflected here is there really is like an enormous diversity of charter schools, and there's places where you'll see this sort of classical curriculum for people who really want that kind of back to basics approach, that they can find charter schools that will support that. And you also have progressive Montessori charter schools, and and I feel like even in, you can find charter schools, like some of the highest performing schools in the state with the highest test scores are charter schools, and you also find charter schools that are really not doing very well. That sort of that flexibility and autonomy then produces a lot of diversity of results, and we do see that the charter sector continues to enroll a lower percentage of students with disabilities. That's not true of every single school. There are some schools that are doing a really good job at that, but across the state, on average, they still enroll a lower percentage of students with disabilities. And so even in some of those critical comments, I think there's some truth to that for people to work on. And I know there's people in the charter sector working to improve that, very actively.
Yeah. Okay. Please indicate if you think the following statement is true or false. Most charter schools in Colorado are funded by their local school district. 40% thought that was true. 21% 29% did not, and 31% didn't have an opinion. Erica, do you want to speak to that? Or?
No, I think it kind of speaks for itself. I mean, part of the reason this is in here, and we'll see this in the next couple slides, is some of this issue of do charter schools like take resources from public schools?
Sure. And yeah, we'll move on to the next slide there. Some people say charter schools weaken district-run schools by diverting students and funding. Do you agree or disagree with this viewpoint? And as you can see, the folks that do agree with this, not surprising to us, is Democratic responses. And those that vehemently disagree, that is obviously Republicans. They don't, agree there. Where unaffiliates, it's really kind of just breaking even. 39 agree, 41 disagree, 20% do not have an opinion. I think it was interesting among parents here, 57% disagreeing. Clearly, again, I think that's a testament to the belief in charter schools, without question, and among parents that obviously whether they have a student in a charter school or not, I think obviously this statement perhaps does go too far, and they disagree with that. Where non-parents, it's a little bit more balanced. So.
Yeah, and this issue is really coming to a head in our districts with declining enrollment, where they're facing these really gut-wrenching decisions about closing schools. And there's sort of this question of what's the right number of schools to have in a district. And, some boards, they don't want to approve new charter schools, or they're wondering, why should we have to close our district-run schools, but not even consider the charter schools in the mix? And the reasons, because there's differences in state law, and we have seen charter schools also close due to low enrollment. But I think there's this issue of how do you manage all the things you have to manage as a district versus someone who's thinking this particular school would be good for some kids, therefore it should exist, and kind of the tension between those two needs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another question. Do you support or oppose a policy that allows the state to intervene in low-performing school districts and have the legal right to close schools or convert them to charter schools? 44% supported this, 40% opposed this idea. So it's, again, very split down the middle here.
Yeah, and for those of you who are familiar with the school accountability system, this goes back to that question about should we be judging schools primarily based on test scores or other factors. State law does give the state the ability to intervene when performance doesn't improve and take some of these more significant steps. Mostly that has not happened. Mostly the state board has approved, signed off on improvement plans that districts have brought to them. Yeah, I mean, I think the partisan divide here is, I think, what we would expect. And I think this would be like a tough decision for anyone to sort of override that local control and take those steps. And so I'm not surprised that voters are divided and that we have a significant unknown, unsure
Sure.
as well.